Red alert, someone is wrong on the internet. There's some TikTok videos and other statements circulating on social media saying that Netflix's collection and use of IP addresses to enforce its new account sharing policies is somehow illegal in Canada. Some of what's being said is true, but in the big picture, the conclusion is wrong. Who am I to tell you this? I'm David Fraser. I'm a privacy lawyer in Canada. I've been working with this very specific law since before it was even passed by Parliament. Privacy law is complicated and nuanced, so I'm not surprised to see important elements of it being misunderstood. I don't want to drag and shame someone on social media for something they likely honestly believe, so I'm not going to reproduce the particular TikTok video. But here's what they have to say. First, Dear Netflix, did you know that IP logging is illegal in Canada? No, it's not, and I'll explain why. Quote, that is unless you're doing business-to-business marketing. I'm not a business, I'm an individual, and individuals have privacy rights when it comes to privacy, unquote. So that's a little right. Businesses do not have privacy rights. Privacy rights are only for individuals, meaning humans. And individuals do have the rights when it comes to privacy in Canada. It then says, under Canadian law, an IP address is considered private information under the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. This is largely correct. The term used is personal information in that particular statute, but the general idea is correct. There are different kinds of personal information. Some is more sensitive and some is less sensitive. An IP address that you expose to the world is likely not sensitive unless it's associated with your visits to websites that are, let's say, a little bit niche or would expose information about health or intimate life. They then go on to say, you need my consent to gather and collect my personal information. You also need to give me an option to opt out of your gathering of my personal information. Yes, consent is required for the collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. The law says the form of the consent should be based on the sensitivity of the personal information. Consent can be implied when the purpose is reasonable, the information is necessary to provide the service. Regulators in the courts often use a four-part test. 1. Is the collection and use necessary to meet a specific need? 2. Will it likely be effective in meeting that need? 3. Is the loss of privacy proportional to the benefit gained? And finally, 4. Is there a less privacy-invasive way of achieving the same end? In this case, Netflix has a new policy of one account per household. I don't like it, but it's their service, and they can generally structure it how they like and bill it how they like. They're using IP addresses as a proxy for households, which is a reasonable proxy and is less likely to be privacy intrusive than alternatives. The rant then goes and says, you also have to delete my personal information at a moment's notice upon my request. Not really. You can revoke your consent, subject to contractual or other legal limitations. If this information is necessary to provide the service, you can shut down your account. Do you think you'd be able to tell your bank to delete all your personal information and still have a credit card? No. It then goes on and says, already dodgy enough that you're looking past my internet service provider to look at my IP is as borderline unethical. Yeah, Netflix, if you could give me a little button that says delete my IP address from my account. Don't store any of my personal information. Yeah, please politely go yourself. It's really not dodgy or unethical. Every time you visit a website, you expose your IP address to the website. That's just how the internet works. When you go to Netflix.com, your browser converts Netflix.com into an IP address so your packets can be routed through the internet. Your browser then essentially knocks on the door of Netflix's server, identifies itself by your IP address, requests data, and then Netflix's server sends the data to your IP address. None of this would work without your IP address. In this case, they're using it for something additional, making sure that your account is associated with a particular IP address over a specified length of time. I don't like the new Netflix policy, but they're not breaking Canadian privacy laws by implementing it. It should be noted that this is not that much different from what most banks do. If you use online banking, the bank servers record your IP address and associate it with your account. If you were to log in from an unexpected or unknown IP address, that raises a flag related to the possibility of fraud. This is done to protect you and the bank. There's a lot more that could be said about IP addresses and privacy, but I think this addresses the issue that has been circulating recently on social media. But before I sign off, I want to mention an interesting case that is working its way through the Supreme Court of Canada. It's called Bikavets on appeal from the Alberta Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court of Canada in January heard the appeal and were waiting on a decision about whether the police need a warrant before collecting IP addresses related to alleged fraud, when those IP addresses are voluntarily provided by the payment processor for the company that was the victim of the fraud. It's clear from other cases that, at least for criminal law purposes, IP addresses attract a reasonable expectation of privacy. Since you've hung around until the end, you're probably interested in this sort of stuff, and you should subscribe. I hope this has been interesting and useful. I try to put out a new video every couple of weeks, so if you're interested in this sort of content, please click the like and subscribe buttons. Also leave a comment if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for other topics to cover. And of course, feel free to share this with anyone who you think may be interested in hearing about developments in Canadian tech and privacy law. Thanks for tuning in.